Welcome to the Agile Wire, where professional Scrum trainers Jeff Bubolz and Jeff Maleski discuss Agile topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Bubolz and Jeff Maleski.
And we're recording. So, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, man?
Sure. So we've got Lucas Smith here on the podcast tonight. So, Lucas, we've been at some talks together. We're fellow PSTs, professional Scrum trainers with Scrum.org, and we've had a number of conversations. And I know you're doing some pretty cool stuff. It's not even recently. It's maybe a year and a half. You moved down to Texas and started working for Toyota. And I know you've been doing some pretty amazing things. So we decided it'd be a great opportunity to have you on the podcast and start sharing some of the cool things that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Is there? So just kicking it off, what's one of the cool things that's going on right now, or that you're experimenting with any of the teams you're working with?
Well, I guess I'm learning a lot. I've been here at Toyota a little over a year. I'm the head of the Agile practice between two different divisions of Toyota here in Dallas. One is called Connected Technologies and the other is Toyota Connected. Everyone gets those acronyms CT and TC mixed up. But essentially, they are the groups that are responsible for all of the in-car entertainment systems, all of the back-end infrastructure behind that, customer support, call routing, data pipelines, data warehousing, mobile apps, basically everything that's going into the in-car entertainment systems. I'd say it is the most complicated picture I have ever worked in. We have
what makes
many vendors.
Yeah, what makes it so complex? Is it the vendors, or is it the combination of hardware and software, or
It's a mix of all of those. So I've described to people here that the fundamental challenge is, if you're greenfield, right, you can kind of do whatever you want. If you slip a production date or a launch date, most people aren't going to notice unless you've made massive promises to customers or something. If you have an existing software product that people are using, say Facebook or something, right? If I slip a feature date, hey, we want to revamp chat on that, right? If I slip a date on that, people are still going to keep using Facebook, right? Okay, maybe there's a little bit of a market pressure from competitors, right? If hey, Snapchat's doing some cool stuff, we better catch up with them, whatever. But we have is a combination of hardware, software, firmware, tons of vendor partners that go into this, and we have a live production line, right? So we have a production line that's already going and is shipping vehicles that have all of our solutions inside of them, right? So if we miss a date and they're cutting over to the new model year vehicles, there's a whole lot of stuff that's got to be lined up directly for that date, right? So it's the production line plus a incredibly established business model and business line, right? You can't, Toyota's selling X number of vehicles, right? So they make millions of dollars a day building vehicles, selling vehicles. They want to revamp that, but there's also a whole lot of risk around that. No one wants to mess up that pipeline. Those are some of the fundamental things that are a challenge. Plus, we're not just building software internally. Toyota is not necessarily going to build an entire mapping application that goes on their vehicles.
Sure.
Right? So we're working with all the major partners to get that on the vehicles as well. And then they have to connect in, we have to build a UI around that, make sure that plays. They have to be able to connect into the infrastructure and the data routing. So that's just one piece of it. Plus, if you've got a voice assistant or virtual assistant, that's got to connect in with another mapping solution. So you add this up, and it is a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, it sounds like it. We were just chatting a couple episodes ago with a friend of ours, Rachel Krause, and she was talking about how in the UX world with the Alexas of the world and Google Assistants and all that kind of stuff, what does that do to, user experience, and how does that change it? And you think, it makes it easier. There's no, interface, right? But it actually, there's so much more variability when you have to deal with that. So it actually makes it much more complex. And so, yeah, I can imagine you've got all of that. It's not just one component that makes it complex. You're integrating everything all the time. So that sounds like a very complex environment. So what are some of the things you're doing to like help manage that complexity? Like, how do you move through that chaos?
It's a good question. So I would say, I wish, in some ways, I wish we could move faster on some things. Some things are just the cadence of the vehicles, right? Okay, we can go this far in this model year. We're going to go this far in this model year. I think one key thing is choices on what we insource, right? So I have, if I look across the spectrum of agility, I've got teams that are building software and shipping software to production, every day. I've got teams that are doing it every couple of weeks. I have teams that are managing vendors who own the IP, and some of them are working in an agile fashion. I have teams that are managing vendors who are not working in an agile fashion at all. We have hardware going on that's not super agile. And then we have big platform that's trying to pull it all together and manage the vendors. And I've got a mix of project managers and Scrum Masters in there trying to pull that piece together. So one is meeting the teams where they're at. Two is making intelligent choices about how we insource stuff. We've made some big insourcing decisions in this next generation system. So some of the key pieces of infrastructure that our turnaround time and cycle time for getting fixes to has been really long. We've made a choice to insource. I don't think we're going to choose that for everything. Like, I don't think we're going to replicate Google Maps, right? That would be billions of dollars of investment just to do that. But making choices on smart insourcing, all the vendors, we're looking at all the contracts with them. How can we build a better trust relationship there? Are they going to partner with us? So it's restructuring contracts, focusing on cycle time, going and helping vendors, right? So we've spent a good bit of time with some of the vendors, helping them understand how we want to work, paying for a dedicated team there. So those are some of the initial ones. Also, just trying to think about our hardware platform and make it the changes so we can integrate the software sooner and get closer to production hardware sooner in the pipeline. So, maybe we have a consistent processor architecture, consistent OS, right, that we want to have between the different generations that maybe we haven't specified before. So those are some of the near-term things.
Sure. The first thing that came to my mind when you were talking through the problem, like, what would I do? And I kept thinking,
what would you do?
I was thinking, the first thing I would do is to remove complexity. I work in smaller batch sizes, as small as I possibly can, and and get stuff to get integrated as frequently as I possibly can, with as many of the teams as you possibly can. And I understand that's really hard, but that reduces risk and complexity and rework and all that stuff, right? So I don't know. I kind of was thinking okay, the biggest scaling environment I can think of, how do you manage the complexity? And it's just frequent integrations and getting it done as soon as you possibly can with a small.
Right, that's the way to drive the risk out of it. And we've done that in some areas and it's been successful. In some areas we haven't had as much success just because of the number of teams, or there's a vendor partner that's in the middle of it.
Yep.
And they're on a waterfall cycle. So what do, right? You have to have some more defined plan. Okay, we can get this far, do as best as we can testing this on prototype units. Okay, then we wait for this, and then we do the downstream, right? So there's a mix in each of the areas on that.
Right. So how do you, this is some conversation I've been having with a client recently. It's when do you outsource and when do you not outsource? And my advice that I gave them was, well, if it's your core business and you really want adaptability and you want high value coming from it, I wouldn't ever outsource that. Now, if it's something like billing and payments, everybody's got it, it's just got to work and it's got to be reliable. You want to outsource that? That sounds like a great thing to outsource. And you can give up some agility for some efficiency maybe in those things, because that's not your moneymaker, right? That's not your core thing. And so that's at least one guideline that I think about, but what other things are you thinking about when you're thinking about when to outsource and when not to?
Yeah, I think you hit on some really good points there, right? how core is this to our business? Is it a competitive advantage for us? Is it a commodity? Has it been commoditized already? Are we just trying to replicate something that already exists? And if we're doing that, if we're trying to replicate something that already exists, we have to have a pretty good reason for that. Whether there's an issue with the partnership. We have a couple of vendors who are supporting multiple OEMs, right? Their business model is to create a product that goes on multiple different vehicles. Now, in some ways, that's efficient, right? It costs less to develop that and sell it out to 5 or 6 partners, but it's not a differentiator anymore for us, right? So if we want to differentiate, we either have to own it or go with a different partner and pay them more to do that. Other things around privacy and data, that would be another one. A lot of our decisions have been around that. If you outsource your key infrastructure and all the customer data that's going through it, maybe your sales channel, there's a bunch of people who have sales processing or have, an e-commerce platform. If you go through them, now they have a lot of your customer data. Is that what you want? Maybe you start there and maybe you make plans to integrate it or swap it out, right? What's your time to market to get that out? And then what is your plan with the data and the privacy around it and the risk? So I think for us, it's been how to simplify, right? How to simplify the ecosystem, thinking about which vendors have been good partners for us, and what's going to create a differentiator for us. There's some key areas that we are investing a lot in that we think, or we're hoping will be a differentiator. We could use an existing product. There are some out there, but maybe they were built not specifically for automotive, right? Or we think we can add something special to it with the skills and knowledge we have. So skills and knowledge is another one, right? Do you have a software team that can do that? Do you have a data science team? Do you have a machine learning team that can do this, right? Or are you willing to invest in it, or do you partner with someone else?
Earlier, you had mentioned cycle time a few times, and coming from automotive manufacturing, that's like we always use that as an example, right? Like in manufacturing, cycle time, those are the metrics that you're looking at. And I'm curious, when you were stepping into that space, are you finding more than cycle time? Is that your primary metric? Is it just everybody knows it and it's easier to associate? And lastly, like what other metrics are you looking at?
Sure. I would actually say I was surprised that cycle time was not as important as it was. The manufacturing side is really, really ingrained, and experts at that, especially when you've got a repeatable process. It's easy to see an investment on a repeatable process and improving that incrementally. Some of the complex situations that we've got going on, it's harder for people to see that. I think we've had some success using value stream mapping and kind of trying to lay out, okay, what is the value flow across things? Where are the bottlenecks? So process efficiency flow. Some of those metrics have been helpful. I do talk a lot about cycle, and it's primarily from the customer perspective, though, not so much from an individual team. It's more, okay, what do we want from a business standpoint on updatability for the vehicles, right? Are we going to target once a month? Are we going to target once a week? There's some business decisions and market, what's the term I'm looking for? Market ingestion, or there's a limit to what people want, right, on their vehicles. You're not going to want to necessarily turn on your car and get a software update every time. So what are we targeting with that, right? And then kind of how do we back out from there? There's a lot of metrics around customer satisfaction. Some of the better successes we've had with vendor partners have been where we had some clear, whether it was an app store rating or a bunch of customer reviews on something, and we could go to them and not just say, hey, you need to fix this. It's our customers are telling us we need to fix this, right? And how are we going to work together to solve that? So one app had been 500 days since they had a 5-star review. Like that's a key anchor point. It's like, hey, we gotta have a problem here. Like, what are we going to do about this? Like, and then that got the team on that side, even though all of our incentives weren't necessarily aligned. It got them thinking about that. This isn't just us selling to Toyota. This is our product. Other people care about it. Our name is on it. What are we going to do to improve that? So those are some of them. I mean, each team honestly has, because I have such a spectrum of teams, I kind of sit down in some of the areas and ask people what makes sense. One of the things I asked the Scrum Masters and to think about was what is the key customer outcome metric for your team or your product? Like, what does that look like? Right? Is it decreased customer calls? Is it decreased handling time in a call center? Is it improved user satisfaction score? Is it improved, App Store rating? Each of those is very different.
Yeah, it's really about using the right tool at the right time, right, and the right metric. Because too often teams just want a recipe, or organizations are like, tell me all the right metrics to use, right? And it's like, no, like it depends. What do you want? And Jeff and I I've talked about this a couple times, actually, I think on the podcast, and we talk about it outside of this too, where there's player scoreboards and then coaches scoreboards, and teams need a player scoreboard that says, hey, this is the score, this is the time left, and like here's the down and distance if we're playing football or something, and all the other stats are great, but the coaches look at that later when we're not playing the game. Like, so what's those leading indicators? What's that main thing we need to focus on while we're in the game? And we're moving forward. So I like, because that's kind of what it sounded like you were describing, is what we call a player scoreboard. Like, what is that thing that we really want to drive towards the team that's that leading indicator into those more impact type metrics for the organization?
Yeah, I like impact metrics. Sometimes it can be hard at the organization level to boil those down. Okay, that's a big impact metric. What is the work we're doing, and how do we see an impact on that? Like, if I take customer calls, for example, right? If we're working on 8 different things that might improve it, it's kind of hard to run a hypothesis exactly on that unless you have some really narrow data. Like, hey, this particular feature, we get this many calls, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, if we improve this, how does that look? Metrics are tricky. We need them, and the closer to the customer side they are, the better they are. The further down you go, they can be really gameable. And I think I like to tell people, think about how this metric can be gamed. Right? That's one of the first things. If you say, hey, we want to measure this, okay, how are people going to game it? Just understand you created an incentive there for people to either hide something or focus on something else, or you just want to think about that. And I think maybe we've even had that conversation on balance metrics, right? So if it can be gamed one way, how are you going to measure something that might counteract that? And you kind of want to piece a couple of them together if you can.
Yeah. Hey, I want to jump into something you said there and just dive into it a little bit. So you said before you're working a lot with the Scrum Masters to figure out what that metric is for their teams. And other people I might talk to in like you're in a similar position in other organizations might say, I would go talk to the Agile coaches. So do you have Agile coaches, or do you just, your Scrum Masters serve at all 3 levels of the organization, throughout the organization, the product owner and the development team, and then you don't really have Agile coaches, or how does that work at Toyota?
It's a bit of a mix. There's a lot of different areas at Toyota, and honestly, each of them is trying a little bit of a different model. The 2 divisions I've got are both look a little different, honestly. I have a total of about 40 Scrum Masters, project managers, and a couple coaches that report to me effectively. We're pretty light on the coaches. There's a lot of focus on the Scrum Masters themselves and operating at team and above level. So there's, do you know Pradeepa?
Yeah.
So Pradeepa is working with me. So she's the primary other coach I've got. So she's doing a fabulous job, working with a bunch of the teams as well. And she's really good at coaching and giving feedback on that. But we're really pushing and relying on the Scrum Masters in those areas to do a lot of it. Some other areas of Toyota have more coaches, and some of it's working well. Some of it, honestly, some of the challenge we've had is where we're at in our Agile journey, and with the amount of hardware and with the amount of things going on, we really need people who can coach people and drive change, but also are willing to do work on the teams. And honestly, we've had a challenge finding coaches who want to do that. In a lot of cases, it's more, hey, I want to help you do something, but I'm not going to step in. And in some cases, that's not what the teams needed. Their maturity level wasn't wasn't there, or the expectations in that area were a mix, right?
Sure. I know when we talked last, was a few months ago, you were telling me about how hard it was to find Scrum Masters at that mature level, and just filtering through the noise. And I kind of told this story to some people, and some clients I've been working with, and they're like, wow, like I don't find that hard of a problem. Am I not looking for the right things? And so we had some conversations around that. And so I guess I just wanted to ask you, like, what are those things that you're looking for Scrum Masters? Because I know, you've had some struggles in the past finding the Scrum Masters that you're kind of looking for at the right level.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll take any tips you have as well, and anything you found to work. I think we've narrowed it a little bit in what I'm looking for. I think honestly, one of the challenge, we have a challenge with knowledge. Just a lot of people don't know the stuff, right? So that's a fundamental gap. A lot of people in organizations that have done quote unquote agile transformation have just picked people off their bench and said, okay, you're the Scrum Master now, right? And okay, maybe they get some basic knowledge and basic rote, do it this way. But if they haven't gone past that and said, why are we doing things, and they don't have a critical thinking or an analytical skill of saying, okay, what's working, what isn't, what are we going to change? That's kind of a barrier for me. I feel like there are a lot of people who don't really understand why we made this change. So that's one level. I think the other one is, really willingness to meet teams where they're at. Like I said, I have teams in vast array, right, of agility. And some of them, honestly, straight Scrum Master role is not what they need, right? But can I find people who understand higher than just team level Scrum or higher than just team level agility, right? They think about business agility. They think about, okay, what is needed from a business context? What is the next step towards that? Is it working with the vendor, right? Is it trying to think about a contract, right? Okay, maybe they're not an expert on that, but they can at least raise that question and say, hey, do we want to look at the contract here? What are the incentives? Can they work with a product owner? Can they coach a product owner? So those are some of the things. Certainly, especially in an organization like this, if I have to, cycle or move people or shift teams, like I need people who can, hey, I'm operating at this point, and now I'm operating differently based on this team. And maybe that's part of why I'm having trouble finding people who are a great fit for that, just because I have so many different needs and they're different between the teams. Sure. Do you have any, I'll turn it back to you. Do you have any tips or anything you guys talked about in narrowing your funnel, right? And how to screen better? And
one thing that I really like is have people practice it. So it's kind of a tip from Menlo from the book Joy Inc., where they have their people come in and they say, hey, we're going to have you pair for a few hours with somebody and solve these problems. They're not even development problems, but they pair in everything they do. And they go and they kind of just see how, basically look for basic kindergarten skills. Can you work well with others? Can you make your partner look good? That's what they're looking for. They don't care if you get the right answer or not. And so one thing you could do is hey, maybe you got 3 different teams, different maturity levels, all in different spots. And they're going to do a daily scrums, at a certain time, and someone comes in for an interview. And what if you just had them facilitate 3 daily scrums, and you saw, hey, this was a really mature team. How do they let the team self-organize around that? Hey, this is a team that's just starting out or really struggling. How do they use some, maybe a little stronger facilitation to make sure that they don't, go off the rails? And here's a team in the middle, and how do they help them inspect themselves as they're kind of going through this and learn how to improve, right? So like just an idea, like you'll get to see how fast they can read a room and they can adjust their style in the middle of a kind of a pressure situation. Because if you're there watching, I'm sure they'll feel a little pressure, or somebody, whoever's kind of walking them through that process. Just an idea.
Sometimes. Yeah, I've used something similar. Depending on which type of team they're coming in. One thing I've used is say, look, I'll do an initial interview screening with them, but then the second round is, hey, meet with the team and plan a 25-minute retrospective, right? Yep. And give them a topic, and just what I ask them to do is try to understand where the team is at. What are their needs, right? And like you said, I'm reading, okay, how do they interact with this team? If I have a vendor management team where I've got a product owner and maybe one QA person, and they're managing or they're working with a vendor, I can't do as much of that, right?
Yeah. Because
that's a different context, and it's really, hey, how do you interact with this product owner? Have you worked in this environment before? What would you say are some of the challenges there? But I can't necessarily put them in front of that vendor team, and interview them that way.
Right.
So there's some challenges with a couple of the situations, but I do like that pattern if you have time, and can invest in that. And I narrowed down to doing a retrospective as kind of the highest value, shortest time item.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you tried that? What was the time commitment?
Usually just be like, if they're in there for an interview and you're just like, hey, they know this daily scrum's going on and I've already prepped the team. Can we just walk down there? Would you be okay, facilitating a daily scrum and just, see how that goes? This may not even be the team you're going to work with, but it's like a team, and you just kind of prep that team that, hey, we have a candidate coming in. Would you be okay with this? And, if it falls flat on its face, it's 15 minutes in the day. It's not that big a deal. Right. And hopefully we all learn something from that situation. So I think it just takes a little bit of prep to do something like that. But I like the retro idea. I think that's another great one, because I think you're going to a little bit more time with the team. You're probably going to have more time to really see the facilitation skills take place. So I think that'd be a great thing too. I was just thinking, for the events, the business agility, like how do you look for that, like their mindset to that? And you might not get that in a daily scrum or a retro, depending on what comes up,
No, that's hard. I guess, I look for situations and what they've done right in the past, and sometimes it's hard to tell whether someone's explaining what they did or what they saw someone else do. Like those are hard things to gauge in an interview situation. Mm-hmm. But, I know if you look at what Google or Amazon do for screenings, they really bias previous performance or previous outcomes, right? So looking at, hey, what was a difficult situation you were in? When did you fail the team? Like, tell me about a situation you failed a team and what did you do out of it? Right. So I had a good answer the other day on that. Like, okay, I facilitated too much, right, in this situation, and then I was gone, for a couple of weeks, from a vacation, and the team kind of fell apart. And the guy said, I saw that self-reflection. He said, I came back and I looked at that. I said, I didn't do a good job teaching them how to do this, right? And that was on me. So, hearing that, or hearing the progression and self-inspection, that's one of the questions I like.
One of the I have a lot of windshield time. I have about 2.5 hours, and I listen to podcasts at 1.5 speed the whole time. So it's about 3 to 4 hours of podcasts that I'm listening to a day. But just for context, there's literally one episode that I keep on my iPhone, and it's Agile for Humans, episode 16. And I like referring back to it every once in a while because it's just gold. It's an hour and a half of gold. And they spend probably about half an hour. It's Ryan Ripley, Amitai Schleier, and Arlo Belshi. I pulled it up here because I want to give credit where credit's due. But they talk probably for like half an hour about Arlo's experience in hiring. And he tells a really great story about just what they found to be so impactful with teams and what you're looking for. And it, this is an older podcast now, but emotional intelligence and really the idea of skills are learnable, especially in our domain, right? Like we're hiring people, we're expecting them to just be able to pick up a new skill. They're not going to be masters of it by any means, but they're going to be able to learn it. It's not a big deal. But the real gel that kind of holds teams together and continues to kind of propel them forward is that ability to have emotional intelligence, and really looking for that. Inside of that, he tells the story very similar to what you were just talking about, Lucas, of just like answers that kind of stood out to him. And one in particular is when they're talking about the success that they got was like setting others up for success, where it was more like, exactly to your thing was, I actually, through self-reflection, found out that I was facilitating too much. Or it was, through this action, I was actually able to stand up Joe over there and help him overcome something. And especially for that Scrum Master, at least to me, that's what I would be looking for, is that servant leader. Like what am I looking for in how he's talking, he or she is talking, to be reflected in those behaviors. Anyway, just a plug for that episode. If you haven't heard it, I think it's amazing.
I just took a note.
The other thing I was going to say was back at one of the companies Jeff and I used to work for, phenomenal ability to bring in highly skilled individuals. Just the people that not only did you enjoy working with, but you enjoyed going out and grabbing a beer with after work. The people that I still play video games with years after I've left that organization. In fact, I was just playing volleyball with a group of them tonight, and only one of them is still with that company. But those were the bonds that we built with one another. And we invested very heavily in our interview process. And so it was a roundtable. It was 3 to 4 hours of interview and groups of people coming in, and very particular about needing the team that person was going to be a part of that interview process, getting them out of just a room, walking them around, even getting them outside of the office just a little bit. I know we had stolen some of Lenciani's stuff.
From the ideal team player, the humble, hungry, smart, right? So you're looking for people that are humble. It's the we language. It's us. It's it's not about, building their own personal brand. It's about the whole entire team. They're smart, but not, it's emotional smart, not like intellectually smart. Can they read a room? Can they read people? Can they have empathy for people? And then hungry. Are they hungry to learn, hungry to improve, hungry to get better? Can they reflect on things and like adjust? So like that story you told me, I was like, oh yeah, I heard humbleness in just the way you told the story, and the way the person, responded to your question when they self-reflected on like, I facilitated too much. And then I heard like, hey, that sounds like some emotional intelligence there to me. Like they must be pretty, they're smart enough to recognize that this was a problem and that I need to make some adjustments. It's not the team's fault. That's on me as a Scrum Master. I should have enabled the team there. So like that story, it sounds like a negative, but really I hear a couple positives out of it.
I definitely heard a positive out of that, right? I think people who can, and I even look at it for myself, right? You want to think about things that you've done, whether they've turned out good or bad. There's always an immediate impact, but there's also lots of other impacts, right? Can you put yourself in other people's shoes? Can you take the next step in thinking and say, okay, I'm just doing this now. I'm seeing an immediate impact, but what are the long-term consequences of this? Am I just getting something done now? And I like to see that as well. So, but I will second, you guys definitely did a good job of screening. I have a lot of friends, I think, from the same company as well. And that's part of the reason I'm connected with you guys. So I was kind of off on a little bit of an island when I was out in your neck of the woods. But so I have appreciated the effort, and I have one of them working for me now. So
that's awesome. So I wanted to jump in with another question here. It immediately came to mind when you introduced yourself as head of the Agile practice. So being head of the Agile practice, are you asked to show the value that you're providing the organization? And if so, how do you quantify or show the value that you provide to the organization?
Okay, that's a good question. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes for both me and the team. I think I have enough different leaders and different people that we support that you kind of have to answer that question a little differently to each of them. Some of them honestly are looking for predictability and delivery, right? Okay, well, how do we show you that? How do we reduce risk? How do we create transparency? I think a lot of it is around just showing the work or talking through the work that we do with the different teams, right? So if you've got a new team or new individuals on a team, communicating our job is really as servants to you, right? How can we help you? What are your key goals? How can we solve some of your pain points in this part of your organization, and keeping track of those. So I think that's maybe the first level is meeting with the product ownership and the leaders in the area and just saying, okay, what is your pain points? How can we help with that? How can we bridge relationships? How can we help you with your teams? How can we help your teams function well so that you trust them, that you can predict them? So those are some of the base level things, I think.
Is that kind of informal, or do you have an actual formal charter or formal working agreement that you build with the coaches and the areas that you're going and interacting with?
I would say it's maybe a little less formal than I would like it right now. That's something that is on my list. I think it's more strategizing with the leaders in that particular area, right? So each of them has a little bit of different setup. So I bring, right now, I don't really have coaches in many areas. So I would go in, meet with the senior manager or the senior product owner, whoever it is in that area, with the Scrum Masters. We take a look at the different teams. We talk about the products that they're planning on building and saying, where is our biggest impact, right? Okay, you've got new teams. We can help you with that. You've got predictability here, or you've got a vendor issue. Okay, maybe we can help bridge that or help go work with that vendor. So it's a little more informal. That's just where we're at right now.
Yeah. So. I think it's one of those things that's interesting because when you think of the service that you provide to your organization, it's a service. It's not a product. And I think services and products are a little different. And sometimes if you try to use product measurements on a service, they don't quite make sense. And so I think there's just something to be careful of when you start thinking about that. Like you may not want to, I don't know. I'm just thinking of you can't just put a revenue on your service because you're not really charging that back. I don't know, maybe you are, I don't know. But if you're not charging anything back to your organization, and then you say, but we saved you this much money, did you really? It's really hard to put a dollar amount on that. I think
I would agree with that. That's really hard to do.
Yeah. There's a softer side of it that sometimes it's just like, did we help you solve your problems? Is it better today than it was a month ago or 2 months ago? And I think, you can have some of those check-ins, maybe those, I don't know, net promoter scores, actual net promoter score, or other things like that you could use. But
those are some of the things I look at, right, as I'm rating the area. Like I would do, as I have to do reviews or give feedback, I would do a net promoter score for that area and ask, hey, these are you were supporting 4 different teams over this past year. Let me just send a short survey to them. Would you recommend this person? Were they help? Let me see if I can remember the questions I used. One was, how likely would you recommend this person to work with you on another team, right? That was one of them. How helpful, how well do you think this person impacted your ability, right, to do good work, or the team's ability to do good work? So some questions like that, I definitely have used.
How often do you kind of collect that information for a coach or a Scrum Master?
Some of it's more informal. Some of it's, I have some people on a monthly cadence where I'm kind of meeting with them or checking in. Some of it's HR process where it's more formal every quarter. So I wish I could do it a little more closely, right? I think if there was more of me or more coaches, I would say, spend time with the different teams, observe them, work on strategy with them on a regular basis, talk with the leaders, right? Kind of get feedback on them as well, but involve them in the process, and do that as regularly as you can.
So if if Jeff and Jeff gave you the magic wand to wave in your organization right now, right there you go. What would be the big rock that you would be trying to remove, and why?
Big rock. Wow. I'm trying to think of which rock. There's a lot of them. I think right now, in some sense, I describe it to people, because Toyota is still like the number one car manufacturer. There's a lot of parts of Toyota that feel like, why should we change? Why should we do something different? And in some ways they're right? We can't discount that, right? Their job and part of the organization's job is discipline and predictability with production, right? They have an existing system, right, that is working. So I think if I could wave one, though, it would be helping people think a little bit longer term about that. There is a risk to changing any existing business. There's a risk to challenging that. But you need people to think in a longer term of, we need to challenge this in a safe way to figure out what's coming. If there's one industry that's undergoing massive change right now, it's the automotive industry.
Right.
I don't know what things are going to look like in 10 years. There's a whole lot of competing ideas, a whole lot of things that are out there, from mobility, from fractional ownership, from electrification, from autonomous vehicles, right? All of those things, it's a very complex picture. No one has a crystal ball on what it's going to look like, right? So getting people to really realize that things are changing, that you can't just stay the same, I think would probably be the biggest thing I would wave my magic wand at.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Two things quick, Jeff, and then I'll shut up and let you talk. The first thing I was going to say, just that sense of urgency, that need to change. I feel it all the time, because I think we're working in a very similar industry where they don't need to change. They're making money right now, but that long-term vision of 5 to 10 years from now, they're not thinking about that, or it doesn't seem like a lot of the people are thinking about it. And then the second comment that I had was really quickly on what you just said about the automotive industry. Just wrapped up large scale Scrum with Craig Larman. He's out at BMW right now, and it's literally for that reason. So he's less adoption inside their automated driving section. I butchered that, but you get what I'm saying.
Autonomous driving.
Thank you both. They're going through less adoption out there because BMW has recognized if they don't have an autonomous vehicle in 5 years, they're done. Like they won't be able to compete with the other industry leaders that are out there. And so I think that it just an interesting point and ties right in with what you were saying, is that sense of urgency, that need to change, and to have that vision to see a few years out from, if we're not working on the things that are going to change the industry in a few years from now, right now, we're behind. So,
yeah, I think it's actually, if you dig even deeper into the short-term focus, I think it's interesting to see what even Eric Reyes has been doing, the lean startup author, right? He's really says and has identified, and I would agree with him, that the quarterly profit focus, right, really drives a lot of the short-term thinking. Yeah. But even beyond that, right, you can't just fault CEOs or leaders in that it's actually the shareholders, which is actually us, right? And we're looking, and we want companies to be profitable and have a margin and some return on our investment with it. And the focus is this short-term gain with it. So what are we doing, right? Is there a different model? He's actually looking at different models of shareholders, right? Can you class shares as long-term ownership, right, where you can't actually sell it all that often, right? And you're bought into the long-term profitability of a company rather than just the short-term gains of it. So I don't know where that's going to go. I just think it's an interesting topic, and if you really dig down to it, I think that's one of the core roots behind a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games that can be played in, publicly held companies to make those quarterly earnings, to sell things that really just kill your, long-term viability as a company. And sometimes that stuff happens just to make the numbers, right? And, and it doesn't even have to be a publicly held company. Sometimes we see it with the budgeting processes in organizations. It's like, hey, things look really good, big afflux of money. Oh, we didn't get quite the whatever we were looking for, but it was still really good. Big downflux in money, right? And like these big swings happen back and forth, and it's very short term instead of more consistent pacing, and just being okay that what, 1 year it might be 20% margins, next year it might be 30, and the next year it might be 10. Like sometimes it goes up and down, and it depends on the markets and so many other factors, and you can't just say it's going to be this if we put this much money in front of that. You don't have that predictability, right?
I think it's interesting if you look at some of the companies, Menlo, I would maybe Valve, some of the other ones, right? The ownership model is really interesting to me. I like to think about that. I think some of the ones that have the most control in doing that are honestly single owner, privately held, right? And they have a lot of flexibility in doing that. I've been in single owner, I've been in employee owned. I thought employee owned would necessarily change, wouldn't have some of the problems of a corporate company, but it still can still have the same thing. They're still thinking about, well, why should employees invest in this company if we can't make, X amount return on investment this year? They're going to pull the money out and then we've got trouble, right? So it's still a focus on that. So it is, the ownership model is interesting and does drive a lot of the culture and behavior as well.
Yeah, it all comes down to the system, right? And
system,
right, the whole entire system. That drives your culture. So
we went deep there. Anyone want to join Washington, try to fix the system? No, that would take a long time.
So you had back at the face-to-face, you had thrown an interesting metric out at me. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but you're something to the effect of the amount of data that Toyota is collecting right now. And you had contrasted it with Facebook, and it was just a mind-boggling number. Do you happen to remember what that was that you were talking about?
Yes. So I'm not going to give you an exact number right now because we're recorded at the moment. But
sure.
Toyota really cares about, first of all, they really care about privacy and security of the data. So nothing is being collected or processed without people's consent on it. But a lot of the things people are looking for, or services or actions within a vehicle, I'll just take an example. Say if you go to autonomous vehicles, is everything going to be processed on site, or there's going to be a ton of connections to other vehicles, to other networks, to traffic, to maps? I mean, you just even maps and navigation is a good example, right? There's a lot of data out and forth. But if you go to autonomous, can you process all the stuff on vehicles? You have to utilize a cloud. How much data is going back and forth between those? If you're not even autonomous, even some of the services we're offering, like collision avoidance or collision detection, right, and notification. How much data has to be processed on that, right, or off and on the vehicle continually. So there's a lot of connectivity, a lot of data going on and off. Some of it can be enabled, disabled based on whatever services people sign up on, and the frequency of it. So we're playing around a lot right now with the processing, the data frequency, how often we store this, but there's a lot of data coming off the vehicles, or could come off the vehicles, depending on what services you're using at the time.
Which I found really interesting, especially when you were talking earlier, just the complexity of different areas of the organization being at different stages of agility, dealing with different constraints as far as outside vendors working in certain ways, more manufacturing to more R&D areas. And now you're also thinking about just stupid amounts of data being thrown in there for different reasons, right? So you're just complexity on top of complexity on top of complexity, which, I mean, kudos to you, sir.
It's fun. I'm learning a lot. We have some really smart people here. It's always great to be in a room with people who are smarter than you. You always learn a lot. It can be intimidating sometimes, and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know if I have enough to input on this specific conversation. But it's really about the network and the connections and helping people get things done and looking at it from a different perspective. And how can we challenge ourselves and how can we improve things?
So coming in from the outside, I'm curious. Before you took on your role, what did you think was going to be your biggest challenge? And I'm curious what ended up being your biggest challenge.
What I think would be the biggest challenge. I did some homework, right? And I met with some of the people. I had a pretty good idea that some of the vendor relationships would be a challenge. Just the number of vendors we're working within the contracts around that. I think some of the hard dates and the integration. So the integration piece and getting people to integrate early and often, like Jeff mentioned, that can be a challenge. Environments, can we operate in a production environment? So that was one of them. Also, how to, one of the big areas of focus has been, okay, how do we do, rolling over the air updates, right? And how do we reduce risk around that, right? You're not necessarily going to roll it to everyone, how do we do rolling wave on that? So I think those were some of the major ones that I thought of, coming in. Most of those have materialized as in some form. I would say prioritization, right, and getting organization and buy-in across the different leaders on what are the priorities. It's been a big challenge. Vendors, the sense of urgency with surrounding partners. I think the leadership in our division, or the two divisions I'm working in, really understands it, and they spend a lot of their time going around to different parts of Toyota, trying to get buy-in around that, or get us autonomy, for us to be able to make decisions that drive some of the behavior. So they really buy into that, which is great. I think the prioritization, their availability, because they're doing that, is low. Plus, just the prioritization has been a challenge. Vendors, think if there are any other major ones. I would say one challenge here is the percentage mix between employees and contract. I didn't think about that coming in, but it is a challenge. It changes the dynamic, changes recruiting process, who you can recruit.
Is Toyota what that looks like. Union represented workforce?
The factories are, for sure. I believe the production facilities are. I don't think most of the IT here is.
I was curious if that was another thing that we can,
a factor in the middle. No, it's generally not a factor. But co-employment risk, right, with contractors and what you can or can't say and how much feedback you can give directly and stuff can be a challenge. So people are concerned about that.
I was kind of curious, just throwing those out there. Often, anecdotally talking with people, they'll often assume the problems are going to be technology related, or generally it's technology, or the stacks are dealing with consultants, or I shouldn't say dealing, that's not what I meant, interacting with consultants. And then it typically boils down to people problems.
It's always people and interactions.
Yeah, so I was just kind of curious if that's what it ended up being for you or not. But good. I'm glad it wasn't that. Sometimes there's maybe some relationship power that needs to be built in there, but prioritization is also another one that comes up. And I was going to ask,
an alignment, right? Prioritization is close with alignment between the different groups, right? And whose priority is what, and does that help me or help you, or are we marching together on the same path?
Yeah, and the other comment I was going to kind of add and also ask, Chad Beyer always throw this out, just talking about organizational whip, the thing that's just eating away, the plague of too much work in process at our organizations. It sounded like that was also one of the things tangentially or related to prioritization, which is just everybody wants their stuff done now and not understanding, the more we're working on, the slower we're going.
Yeah, I think, honestly, if I look at the different scaling models and the different patterns, one of the bigger challenges, and if I'm thinking about it, you're keying now, do you previously, I guess we had been organized more around the vehicle launches or model years, right? Because there's major updates around those. So one advantage of that is you have a kind of a dedicated team around this vehicle or set of vehicles, and they own more of it end to end. One of the disadvantages is because those vehicles overlap, right? And you've got hardware in the mix, and you have to work with vendors to specify what they're going to provide to it, that you don't get a continuity in building up a product line between those. So if you take navigation, for example, okay, you have one set of people building it and another set of people completely separate building something different that's supposed to be an incremental, on it. So that was kind of a major challenge in, okay, how are we going to evolve this product line? How are we going to own this set of products and evolve them in a continuous way? So we moved away from that, right, around product ownership. We've got product owners over navigation, virtual assistant, embedded apps, mobile apps, like different areas like that. But because of the whip, because we've got hundreds of thousands of in-market customers, we've got near-term systems that are going out, plus next-generation systems that have already started, right? And people are building stuff on them. There is a lot of tension between those priorities, right? If you could reduce the overall cycle time of the build, right, so that things were more sequential, that would help a lot. And that's a lot of where we're talking, where we're thinking about insourcing versus creating more of a sustainable platform that we build on top of. So that's one of the key structural challenges we've got is you can't just do product ownership because the cycle time on the major platforms is too long. If you do dedicated teams on the platforms, then you don't get the continuous product ownership evolution. And then with all the vendors, like how do you really get an end-to-end owner of something? Like who owns your navigation experience, right? And that ties in with your virtual assistant, right? If you're going to talk to it, it ties in with Google or whoever else we use for mapping. It ties in with the application, the head unit. We call the in-dash system the head unit. Ties in with the user interface there, ties in with the firmware and the actual hardware that's being built by a different vendor, and then the backend data and system, right? So there's a lot of connected pieces, and just getting end-to-end ownership around that and reducing the whip, right, is a challenge.
You mentioned scaling in there, and I'm just curious, is there a framework that you're kind of prescribed to or more ideals that you're kind of going with, or is it more of just an ad hoc approach to working at scale?
It certainly depends on how, I think the first question is how many teams do we really need to work together to integrate, right? And if you can reduce that from an architecture standpoint or a dependency standpoint, right, you've reduced your complexity, right? So some of the teams fairly standalone or they're working with 2 or 3 teams, it's not as much of an issue. A couple of the groups, we've got upwards of 30 different teams, some vendors, some internal, et cetera. So those, honestly, we're leaning more towards a safe model, at least at the PI planning standpoint, just trying to get a handle around the schedule and the dependencies between the different teams. I would say that wasn't necessarily in place to start with, but we've kind of learned we need a little bit more structure at that level. Just the self-organization aspect, because teams are kind of split sometimes between in-market or current generation, we were having trouble with that end-to-end ownership.
And I think a lot of teams just having that, that phrase, making the hidden visible, like let's just, make these connections at least visible, making these dependencies visible, and at least start having conversations around them, as opposed to just these hidden impediments that are consistently holding up our teams from being able to deliver done software or whatever the case may be.
So we have some teams doing Nexus as well, and that's been working in some of the smaller context, right, where you have, I think we have 5 teams, right, and they're trying to, they've got a little bit of a Nexus integration team that is responsible for making sure stuff gets pulled together right at the end of every sprint. We've got some elements of Scrum at scale, right, with the fractal product ownership. It does look different in each of the areas just because I've got so much.
I was going to say, that's pretty cool. It's like a laboratory of all the different scaling frameworks.
Yeah, we have a little bit of that. Because it's not just we have one product, right? If you've got, the thing is, most of the scaling frameworks are built around how do you get multiple teams that are working on one product. Right. Even SAFe is really that way. You break it out into release trains, and you've got one product, and these teams releasing into that. Now, if you have multiple products, multiple teams, none of them really answer that question.
Yeah, gotcha. That's like, what?
So, better answer would be, can you descale? Can you create? Can you split it out? I haven't been able to in some of these situations. So, what are we gonna do?
Gotcha. Well, if you haven't, you should go to Larman's class.
How to descale.
I know.
He might get run out here.
It would definitely be a thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah, it's on my list. Yeah, I would love to go.
Yeah, I'm still on my kick. I just wrapped up the training a few weeks ago now, so I can't shut up about it at some point. So, but anyway, highly recommend the class to you. So.
Awesome. So we've had a great conversation, Lucas. At this time, is there anything you want to plug or anything you want to promote on the podcast?
I guess I would just say to any Scrum Masters out there, right, who are listening to this, or coaches, just really understand when you go into an organization, understand the history, why they got there. Understand the people, build the relationships, but also meet teams where they're at, right? And don't get frustrated if change is slow. Some of the places where change is most needed or is most impactful are in some of these large companies, right? And the larger the company, the more inertia, the more established product lines you've got going on. It's not wrong for things to be slow or to take a little bit more time to get where you want. So be patient. Things that are valuable can take a long time and can involve a lot of hard work. So just encouragement, right? If you find yourself in a great, startup situation, you can control everything. The team has full autonomy. Great. If you find yourself in a established company where there's some boundaries that you can't go around, that's not wrong. That's just a different situation. So just understand the context, meet the teams where they're at, and think long term. We want the organizations to think long term, so we need to think long term as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we have you back on the show in the future.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Wire. We are consistently inspecting and adapting ourselves. We would appreciate feedback at feedback@theagilewire.com or on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play Store. See you next time.